Health Alert is brought to you by OU Physicians in Tulsa. Hello, welcome to Health Alert. I'm Pam Butler. Today we're going to talk about at-risk programs for students, and joining me is Marvin Blades. He's the president of 100 Black Men. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, before we begin to talk about some at-risk programs and what to look for in elements and sort of what's going on, tell our viewers about the 100 Black Men of Tulsa, because some people may not have seen shows where you've been on before. Give us a bit of a history of the organization and its focus.
We're actually an international organization. We have chapters in England. I got a chapter in France, Barbados, one in Cuba, and several in South America. In America, we have 30 plus chapters in America. The chapter here in Tulsa is the only one in Oklahoma. Matter of fact, we're the only one west until you get to California.
Wow.
But what happened is about probably close to 16, 17 years ago in Tulsa, was having a major problem with gangs. And a group of black men got together at Metropolitan Baptist Church. And we decided to try to attack the problem from a community perspective, where men would be out front. And one of the organizations that we came across at that time was 100 Black Men of America. So we partnered up with them, and we started our programs.
Okay.
That's how we became a chapter here in Tulsa.
Now, those that participate, are they all ranges or age levels of men, all kinds of professions? I mean, tell me about your membership.
Our membership goes from 18 years old until as long as you live alive.
Okay.
Several of our members, several of our founding members are no longer here with us. Reverend Collier, one of our founding members, his church used to be one of our major meeting places. But we have members as young as 18, and our oldest member that I'm aware of is about 75, 76 years old.
Okay, now do you have membership fees, or how do people join if they want to participate?
We do have membership fees.
Okay.
Part of our membership actually go to the national, and part of it stay here to help us function locally.
Okay. Now, what are your goals or outreach efforts? What is it that you're trying to accomplish as an organization? Well,
our concentration is black males, particularly trying to keep them educated, keep them in school, form mentoring programs, form programs that keep them focused, out of trouble, out of jail. And right now we got a major focus on anti-gang programs that we're doing. We give out annually scholarships. This year alone, we gave out 6 scholarships, and from $500 all the way to $2,000. So we're trying to keep our young men in particular involved and out of trouble as much as we can.
Now, do you work with families, the family unit, while you're working with the youth? How do you incorporate the family?
We do. Part of what we do is what are called gang interventions. In our gang interventions, we try to involve whoever's in the family, either a mother, father, or most times it's just a mother. But we try to involve them so we can get to the core of what's causing the problem. A lot of times we got parents that are of young people who are incarcerated, and we deal with young people that are in and out of penitentiary. We deal with parents that are in and out of penitentiary, and we try to bridge that gap so we can stop this cycle.
Okay, we will do a show too where I'll tell our viewers an upcoming show that's going to actually focus on revisiting the gang issue and updates related to that. Now, I do want to ask you in relation to the work that you're doing. Say there are persons that are members of other ethnic groups. They may say, well, he's talking about 100 black men. Can they participate in some kind of way if they have an interest in working with youth that are high risk, that are African American?
I'm glad you asked that, because we're partnering up with the Hispanic community. And there's a lot of young men, particularly going to Rogers High School and Cleveland Middle School, that we're involved in. And what we're going to do once we partner up with the Hispanic group, we're going to concentrate on both groups.
Okay.
And they're going to pattern what they're doing after what we're doing.
Okay. Now, do you reach out beyond just Tulsa? Let's say there are neighboring communities that may be having difficulties, outlying areas. Do you offer your services there, or can they contact? I mean, how do they get information or help?
Well, the interesting thing, we don't necessarily offer them to other communities, because we think we're more effective if we maintain this community.
Okay.
But last year there was an incident in Muskogee, and the Muskogee community called on us. There was an incident in Oklahoma City where we were called on. So we don't, if it's something that we can actually physically impact, we will go. If it's something that really beyond what we can do, we will let them know. But we try to focus mainly on Tulsa.
Okay, let me ask this other question too. You have a sister organization because you're talking about the 100 Black Men. You're focused on African American or Black youth. What is your sister organization called, and what is their focus?
Well, their focus is the same as the men, except their focus is on Black females. The organization is called Women with the 100.
Okay.
And it started last year, and they're extremely busy. As a matter of fact, they got some incidents coming up on the weekend and coming up during the summer that they're very involved in.
Okay. Now, you offer, so you work with at-risk youth. So before we get into programs, tell us a little bit about sort of the concept of at-risk youth. How do you classify youth as at-risk? What are some of the factors you look at?
Well, one of the main issues that we look at is a young man who by his living conditions is exposed to gangs, exposed to criminal activity, exposed to activity that will either force them to drop out of school or force them to get involved in criminal activity. Those are what we consider to be at-risk children.
Now, do you look at those in terms of their academic performance? Because a lot of times, as just a general public too, when we think of at-risk, we think about, the at-risk schools. We look at the grade issue and that academic performance. Do you factor that in, or is that not as key as the other things you mentioned?
It becomes a part of it because generally if you got a kid that's at risk of getting in gangs and they start exhibiting that kind of behavior, their grades are going to drop. So that becomes a part of it also.
Okay. Now, how do these youth come to your attention? I know you're active and out in the community, but in order for you to work with them, does there have to be a parent, or is it where you're seeing children involved in certain things and you contact the parent or family to work with them? How does that work?
Both ways. A lot of our members are policemen. A lot of our members are teachers. A lot of them are preachers, and we get referrals. A lot of times we do presentations. Last year alone we did 5 gang forums. And as a result of the gang forums, we had parents who actually come up to us and either ask for an intervention or ask to sit down and talk to their young people. So that's one of the major reasons, one of the major ways we get referrals from parents and from people that are involved in the organization.
And so people in the community that are concerned or seeing areas of youth that need help can also contact you for assistance.
That's correct.
Okay, well, what we're going to do is take a really quick break, and I want to come back and pick up on interventions and then look at sort of what is the structure of an at-risk program that may be more beneficial, and then maybe some elements that are not quite as beneficial. Okay? Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
And 30. Oh! Yo, hey, Allison.
What's going on?
Working on my free throws, just on 30 straight.
30? That's not possible.
Maybe not possible for you, but I've been practicing.
Step back and give me the rock.
Okay. Nice.
1, 2, 11. You know it's harder when people are watching.
Hey, 11's not that bad. All you need are a few pointers.
Thank you. Are you a free throw expert?
Well, no, not really, but I do know excellent teamwork when I see it. It's so much easier to get active and live healthier when your friends are there to motivate you with a little friendly competition.
Now let's get this game started. Oh, she's going for the hook shot. Hook shot. That's what I'm talking about.
America,
Let's get healthy together.
Welcome back to continue our discussion talking about at-risk programs for youth. Joining me again is Marvin Blades, the president of 100 Black Men of Tulsa. Let's jump in. And I do want to say this, Marvin, because I didn't in the first segment. You talked about your membership like being police officers and teachers and that, so that people come from all kinds of professions. You yourself are a former Tulsa police officer. Over 31 years, yes. And you're also working with Tulsa Public Schools and their campus police. So you're still extremely actively involved in sort of serving the community in that perspective as well.
That's correct.
Okay, I want to get that out.
Okay.
Now, let me ask this too before I get into the other. How do youth feel about that? Because that's something just popped into my mind and others too. If you have an organization whose membership are even active police officers or retired or still working in some capacity. How do the youth feel about that who might have these tendencies towards criminal activity or engaging in it or that kind of thing? Are they more receptive to you? Are they a little more hesitant? Do you have to break down more barriers?
No, after being in it so long, you establish relationships, you develop relationships, not only with the kids that you're around, but also in the community that you live in. I've been fortunate enough to police the community that I live in. I've also been fortunate enough to worship, shop, and basically do my business in the same community. So over time, I had a chance to develop relationships, and these are the relationships that we get referrals from, that we use to more or less foster what we're doing.
So in some respects, they may be more positive towards you because you've been in the community. They see you as still an integral part and someone who's really concerned versus just someone coming in totally from the outside.
Yes, it kind of reminded me, years ago I went to a National Black Police Convention, and I met a retiring New York City police officer. And he told me something that always stuck with me. And he said, dedication to the job doesn't begin until you're not getting paid. And that's always stuck with me. And that was back in 81, 82. And so what we do is not necessarily something that we may see rewards from right now. But I think in the long term, it's something that's going to benefit not just us, but Tulsa as a whole.
Excellent. Now, you talked about before the break being involved in interventions. Tell us what interventions are.
Okay, this is something that we actually came up with when I retired from Tulsa Police Department. I worked the gang unit for 8.5 years. And what I saw lacking when I was with Tulsa Police Department was that there was no follow-up. We're putting a lot of people in jail, and it's real easy to arrest people, but it's not easy to keep people out of jail. So what we decided to do when I became president is to focus on some type of intervention where we can impact a young person before they get involved in gang and criminal activity. So we started what is called an intervention team. And our intervention team is unique because we actually got former gang members that are on our team. We got guys who have recently gotten out of the penitentiary. We got parole officers. We got guys that actually work with youth services. And we put together a team, a fairly solid team. And we probably average about 50 to 60 interventions a year.
Okay, now with these interventions, is this where, I'm thinking about what we used to see on TV with the Scare Straight programs. Is this where you sit down and the youth are there and everybody's just, that's what they did on TV, just yelling and screaming and talking about things and saying what you don't want to do and this, or do you take them on field trips, not really a field trip, but going to the penitentiary for them to talk to other people? I mean, what's involved in this intervention that maybe is different or unique?
Our interventions are tailored. We got a young man who was basically disrespectful to his grandmother, because a lot of these kids are being raised by grandparents. Then the way we deal with him is going to be different than a young man who has a father and a mother in the house.
Okay.
We got young men who all you basically got to do is let them talk to ex-con, and that's enough. That scares them enough where I don't want to do this. But we got some young men who, when your parents are locked up, when you got brothers and sisters in and out of the penitentiary, they're a little more hardcore than the young men that I talked about earlier. So we have to tailor what we do. The intervention has to be tailored so they can work and so they can fit the situation.
And that's really good. So there's just no one blanket thing. And so therefore you're able to find where each child is and have to meet that need to sort of begin to make changes.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about at-risk programs, then what are some of the elements or the characteristics that are important to have there? I mean, because we know about a lot of programs, and people just put together a program maybe to get a grant or whatever it is, but what are some of the critical elements that you think should be there?
Well, outcome is probably should be at the top of the list when I say outcome. If we got a young man that's basically doing things that are going to land him in a penitentiary or in a graveyard, we got to come up with outcomes that either going to stop the behavior or show the young man in some way that his behavior is negative. So what we try to do, we try to set up programs where we're not only in the schools, we're in the homes, we're involved with them during the summertime. When we get a mentor who has, they have to be committed. We got a mentor who's what we call half-stepping. Basically, we'll call them to the side and we'll replace them with somebody who's a little more dedicated. Because one thing about these kids, particularly if there's not a two-parent household, we got a young man or a young lady who's probably used to being disappointed. They're used to people making promises to them and not keeping them. So it's important that what we do, we follow up and we keep our promises, that we show them that we're actually committed to what we're doing.
So with that, then, a mentor seems to be sort of a critical component of an at-risk program, whether it's a summer program or year-round program. The characteristics then of the mentor, you did mention about being dedicated. Do they have to have so much time a week? Do they have to be able to call or visit, or is it just phone calls? I mean, what do you look for then in a mentor, since that's a critical component of a program for your youth?
Well, we actually got two types of mentors. We do what is called group mentoring, and we do the one-on-one.
Okay.
See, we got some guys who either due to their job commitment, they can't give more than maybe 2 hours a week.
Okay.
But we know we can stretch that 2 hours into 4 or 5 hours, and we do what are called group mentoring. If we get this young man with his mentor, and we meet in a group, we go to the movies, we go to the park, we sit down, we talk, we try to get at the bottom of these issues that are causing him problems. We try to stay on top of these criminal issues particularly, because these are the ones that are either going to take him off the street, these are the ones that may get him harmed on the street, or wind up getting him locked up. And that's what we're trying to stop more than anything else.
So does the mentor have to have the ability to just to listen? I mean, to listen, and then, because sometimes as adults, we may think we're listening, but we're talking more. Or every time the child says something, we've got a solution, or why don't you try this, or why do you do that? I mean, so what kind of skill set does the mentor need to have with that?
Well, we're fortunate because we partner with the Youth Services of Tulsa.
Okay.
And they actually got a 2-week training program
Excellent.
that all our mentors go through prior to, that includes a background check, that include suggestions and recommendations on how to impact this young person. We got a checklist that we fill out with the parent or whoever the child's guardian is, so we can see where the child is and we can focus on those issues, so we're not just out there doing anything and everything.
Okay.
So what we try to do, we try to get a mentor that fits the kid. A lot of times you'll stick somebody who volunteered to be a mentor, but they're not the person for that child. So those are the ones we need to watch and make the changes when we need to make them.
Okay, and that's really excellent that you talked about sort of a 2-week training or assistive program for mentors, because they need to know what to expect and what the skill set, and maybe to determine whether or not they really would be a good mentor in this program.
Definitely.
That's a good thing too. Well, stay put, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some specific programs in terms of especially summer outreach programs that you're involved in. Okay, please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Up to 40% of businesses never recover after experiencing a major disaster. Make a plan at ready.gov/business.
Welcome back. To complete our discussion talking about at-risk programs for youth, joining me again, Marvin Blades, the president of 100 Black Men of Tulsa. Let's jump in, Marvin. Now, with the at-risk programs, you were talking about mentors being really critical and key, and also looking at the outcome. Let me ask this question about this, because you said especially you want to focus on criminal activity, or if youth are becoming involved or surrounded by. How do you get a person, a youth who's involved in those types of activities, to actually talk about it, and then what do you do about it? I mean, what if they say, I was involved in that incident the other night, and I did shoot the gun, or I drove the car, or, you know, because they're feeling comfortable and that you have that trust. What do you do with that?
Well, you'd be surprised what kids will tell you once you, like you said, you get a trust. We've had young people who were involved in, let's say, pharmacy robberies, and they told their mentors. Generally, when that happens, we're real careful because that's kind of delicate, because you don't want to lose the trust. But at the same time, we understand that when the criminal activity is committed, particularly dangerous criminal activity, it needs to be addressed. So what we let the child know right from the beginning of the program when you get in, that we don't tolerate criminal behavior.
Okay.
If you're involved in dangerous criminal activity, we're going to address it first. You know, if you're involved in a shooting or you got a gun, we have to address that first. So there's an understanding even right from the beginning that that's where we're going to be coming from when we deal with you.
Now, is addressing that mean that you're going to have to report that to Tulsa Police, to the police authority? What does it mean?
If they shot somebody, it has to be reported.
Okay.
If you did a major assault, aggravated assault, it has to be reported. Minor incidents, we can probably deal with them a different way, but major crime has to be reported, has to be dealt with.
Okay.
And we want them to understand that there's consequences when you do those kind of actions.
Now, do you as an organization then have a working relationship with Tulsa Police Department, with the DA's office, District Attorney's office? Do you have relationships with these individuals that are supportive of what you're doing and kind of work with the youth as well?
Yeah, Chief Chuck Jordan, Tim Harris.
Tell
and
people
also
who they
Stanley
are in
Blades.
case they don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
Chuck Jordan is a current Tulsa Police Department police chief.
okay.
Tim Harris is district attorney, and Stanley Glantz is the sheriff, Tulsa County.
Okay.
We do have a relationship with them. As a matter of fact, during our peace marches and doing some of our forums, they also show up and they do participate. So we do have a working relationship with them.
Okay. Now, when we look then at the at-risk programs, summer programs throughout the year, what if a student is having difficulty reading? I mean, tell me about your programs that you're offering, especially during the summertime or when schools are out. Are they just athletically focused, which is what we see a lot of them being, the sports type of camps? What is in yours?
Well, a lot of our members are pastors. And Reverend Potter has a program that they probably had for the last 10 years where they actually rent one of the schools and they're close to their church, and they hire teachers. So they have tutoring all during the summer. They feed them 3 meals. They not only tutor them, but they got additional programs they do with the kids when it comes to conflict resolution and things like that they deal with them. We got some of our members who got direct connections with the district attorney's office, with the campus police, and we got programs going on right now that are dealing with them. And they not only tutor them, but they also deal with, again, conflict resolution. We're real heavy on the conflict resolution because a lot of times that usually leads to that next step, that bad behavior that might get them in trouble.
Okay, so even in terms of those kind of programs, like you said, really looking at the whole child. You're focusing on ways that you learn to deal with anger or resolve dispute or disagreements without violence. And what about things like self-esteem building? We hear about that all the time. I mean, how, if you have a child, sometimes they're not appearing to be, but they really don't feel that good about themselves. How do you help lift that when you see that?
Well, the model that we use is, I don't know if you ever heard of the GREAT program. That's a gang relation intervention program. But in the GREAT program, one of the things they deal with is self-esteem. And they do push the fact that this peer pressure deal, which in my opinion is at the base of a lot of things that these kids do.
Okay.
You know, where you're seeking not only solace, but a relationship that you're not getting at home in the streets, and you're getting it from peers who got probably the same skill set that you got. So what we try to do, we push putting those positive male role models out there.
Okay.
And it's all during the summer. We got a deal going on this evening. We got one going on tomorrow, and several coming up next week that we're dealing with. We have to keep them out front so these kids can see that, so they have a behavior they can model after that's positive.
That's really good. Do you help them sort of with living skills as far as like balancing, you know, earning money legitimately, and how do you manage it, and how do you go about, do you incorporate things such as that?
Well, I tell you, at one time we actually tried, we had members that had small businesses that would let the little young men work cutting lawns and things like that. But we started running into problems with young men not showing up, and it was hurting these guys' businesses.
Okay.
So that stopped being one of our focuses, because when they were doing that, we found out they were getting caught up in the criminal activity. So we went back to focusing on anti-criminal activity more than anything else. What we found out with these kids, if they don't have recreation activity, if they're not getting the attention from that male role model, they're going to misbehave. So we're focusing on keeping that from happening.
Okay, because if, like you said, if you can stabilize that and put it at its core, the other things and the conflict that you're doing, resolutions, the other things will kind of come into view, and the child can learn to deal with that better.
That is our hope.
Now, in terms of mentorship, let me ask this in our last few minutes here, and how the organization is working. If a child is in crisis, 2 a.m. or being tempted, can they reach out and call? Is that a part of it, or do they feel like, okay, well, there's nobody there for me to talk this through with? Do you work with that?
It's strange that you mentioned that. Last weekend, we recovered a gun at 2:30 in the morning. We had a parent that we've been dealing with, and the parent actually called us. I got hold to 2 more of our members, and we went to the house. We recovered the gun. I contacted some on-duty officers. This one gun turned out to be stolen. The young man, we were able to deal with him a little bit later in the day. He wasn't at home. But we sat down and talked to the mother. We told him what the consequences could be. We told him that this gun may have been used in a crime. So she understands that right now. What we're waiting on right now is what's going to come out of the district attorney's office.
Okay. So you continue to work closely, no matter what the hour is.
Oh, yes.
You're available and you respond.
And we told the kids we're going to be available 24/7, so we have to be.
Okay. Now, what would you want people to know about your organization as we wrap up, or the involvement? Do you need some more mentors? Do you need some more members?
Well, what I like people to know is that we're out there. We don't turn down any help, and there's no such thing as too much help. So if you got any time at all, contact us. We meet every last Tuesday of every month of youth services at 5:30.
Okay.
If you can be there, like I say, we can hook you up.
And monetary support is helpful because you do need sort of monies to help the kids and take them to events and different things such as that, right? And run these programs.
We do, but we do. But we've been real fortunate because the corporate sponsors around here have been extremely helpful.
Okay.
They donate tickets to us, and we have tickets to the Sharks games all the time.
Excellent.
So we do have an opportunity to do that. Oral Roberts, TU.
Okay, so donations are welcome too.
Oh, yes.
More corporate sponsors.
Oh, yes.
Thank you so much for joining me, Marvin, and thank you for your work.
You're welcome.
Well, that's our show. For Health Alert, I'm Pam Butler. I'd love to hear your questions, suggestions, comments for future shows. Please write me at Health Alert USA, P.O. Box 50913, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74150. Or if you're on the email trail, please email me at healthalertusa@gmail.com. And also visit me on YouTube at youtube.com/Health Alert USA. And remember, check into the community, get involved, donate your time, your effort, tickets, whatever you can do to support our youth. Take care. Health Alert is brought to you by OU Physicians in Tulsa.